While learning Bastion routes isn't too difficult, it can often be pretty tough to tell what Bastion you're looking at, depending on how buried it is with terrain, or what you can see, or even just, knowing in general. This video is made to compile some tips so that you can identify bastions as quickly as possible, depending on what you can see. And hopefully it'll make it so you can, spend less time confused on what you're looking at. In general, the easiest bastion to identify is going to be treasure, just because it's the only bastion without traditional ramparts. Rather than having like a triple or a double rampart, it just has this shape and it's the same every time. Easiest way probably is if you ever see like a smooth wall at all. Like you could just see like this and no other bastion's gonna have this shape, where it's just a smooth wall with occasional little 1x1 holes. This is kind of an instantly if it's treasure. Another thing is this pattern back here, these big long stripes that go all the way up and down. No other bastion has like one continuous thing like this, since most of their ramparts are traditional. This is also very tall. Sometimes you'll see like this, and treasure does carve out the terrain on top, which makes it pretty helpful. It's pretty easy to see it sticking out. And then also you might have seen, but the back is also carved out. This is also kind of helpful for like leaving treasure. But if you like spawn in the treasure and you're here and it's all buried, you can kind of just look out the back and see if there's any terrain that opens up. But in general, treasure is probably the easiest to tell. If you see like, for example, this, you can tell which side you want to go towards because it's this little like sticking out part. If you look at it top down, it actually sticks out on the left a couple blocks and it's not really centered. And on the right, you can't actually see it if you're close. So just be wary when you're trying to find the route start over here. But treasure is definitely probably the easiest. Now the other three are tough because sometimes you're just gonna see like a buried rampart like this, and this triple can be in, bridge, stables, or housing. They can all generate them. The easiest of those three to differentiate is gonna be bridge. The main thing is it's the only of the three bastions that has anything taller than the triple. So if you ever see like a triple and you see something that rises even taller, it just has to be bridge. Another good way to tell is if you're looking like in the triple, depending on which side you're on, you just see this like wall. Like if you're thinking about housing and stables, this could only be either another triple or a double or a single rampart. But on bridge, this isn't a rampart. This is just going to be like a wall. And this will be here every time. You'll see that it's in terrain, but it like carves this out. So this is always the same. And then same with the right triple. A lot of times you'll enter here and it's buried. Like this technically could be like a stables. Housing, we'll talk about it later, but these wouldn't be here. But you'll see this divot right here. It's like almost a 3x3. And you can just dig through here and this will be like the middle area. If it's open though, like if you just look to the sides and you see something that isn't a rampart, you just know you're in bridge and what you're looking at is the middle part. So pretty good thing to look at. Another unique way to identify a triple is if you have a triple like this and you see there's something to the right of it, you know automatically this is stables. Because in housing, the rightmost rampart of the two is always a triple. While stables, any of the three can be any of the three types of ramparts. So if you see a triple and you can see like a chunk to the right of it that isn't a triple, you instantly know it's stables. You'll also see that stables has a lot more terrain in the triple. Like when it's this buried, it just has to be stables, because on bridge, it's pretty carved out except for like the edges. But on stables, like this area right here where you jump up can just be like almost fully blocked in. This is a pretty good way to identify it. And then finally you have housing. You'll see that there is just a perfect cube of air that has been carved out around the triple. Like when you see these flush walls that just destroy the terrain, you know it's housing. Because housing has like a bounding box in the triple. Like you'll see not a single block is anywhere in this like cube. And this is definitely like the easiest to identify. If you like see this, like, stables could have a double and a triple. But when you just see this right here, like these flat walls, you instantly know it's housing. It's really useful. Probably like the best thing you can identify. So another way to tell which bastion you're in is the distance between the chests. So you'll see there's a double and a single, right? And all the three bastions that have normal ramparts like this, they're all going to have chests. However, you'll see that there's 3 blocks in between the single and the double chest. And this is only true on housing and bridge. Now, if I go over to stables, you'll see that on this little like basalt, the chest is on the right. So there's only 2 blocks in between them. This is pretty helpful. I think I heard Fulham say 2 is poo and 3 is free as like a mnemonic to remember. And low-key, it kind of helps out because, I think a lot more people prefer housing over stables just because it's a bit easier. But if you ever see a triple rampart and there's 2 in between, it's 100% stables. You don't have to have any other clue at all. This will always be on stables. And then of course housing also is the 3. It should be pretty easy to tell if you're in housing or bridge, just from the tips earlier. So the bigger thing is housing and stables, because a lot of time they're going to be pretty similar. Now to go into more housing versus stables differences, the easiest way to tell is the number of ramparts. Housing always has 2, with the, I guess depending on which way you're looking at it, the rightmost from the front the leftmost from the back, this is always a triple. But sometimes, like in this case, it's kind of hard to tell if there's a third rampart. A really good way to tell the difference is the backs of the ramparts. So housing, you see how this wall is just flush from the left to the right. Stables, the middle one is offset by a couple blocks. You can pretty much always tell if this is a stables or housing just from like glancing at the back. So you'll see that these blocks are all flush. But going to a stables, you'll see that this is like offset by 2. And going over here, this is also offset by 2. On the topic of ramparts, there are some differences on the non-triple ramparts between stables and housing. So on stables, you'll see that this like broken down. This is called a single rampart. There's a chest here. But if we go to a housing, you can see there isn't a chest here. So if you're on housing and you see this kind of ruin, right, it's like way smaller than the triple, there's not a chest here and you don't have to bother. Another difference is with these double ramparts. In stables, you know, they both have this chest here on stables, bridge, and housing. But on housing, this lower part is different. You'll see that there isn't like a part here with a chest or anything or a lantern. It just kind of gets destroyed. So while most of it looks the same and there is a chest up top, there is none on the bottom. And here's stables, for example. You'll see that has a chest up top. But instead of this kind of going down and destroying, there's a chest in like bottom middle part. Also on the topic of these double ramparts, a really neat way that you can tell is actually the chest orientation and position in the double. So you'll see there's like 5 blocks here. On stables, the chest is leftmost right here and it's facing to the right. But if I go into a housing, it's more on the right. It's 1 from the furthest right and it's facing forwards. And then even bridge, you'll see it's dead in the middle looking forward. So this one's a lot harder to remember, I think, just because there's 3 different ones. But if you only see a buried double rampart, this can really change how you route the Bastion. Stables, bridge, housing. Now for the rest of the tips, they're just going to be about like the lower areas or like the general like shape of the non-treasure bastions. So housing versus stables, of course, we talked about the 2 ramparts perfectly lined up, only 2, is like very distinct, but this shape as well is pretty distinct. You'll see that, you know, we have these like kind of Tetris pieces sticking out. Like, I guess that's the best way I can describe it. There's a whole bottom right. In the bottom right, there's also like some basalt, and this leads to like the middle area, like the mid down spot. Another way to tell is the like outer ramparts, because both housing and stables have this like lower, like smaller area that kind of sticks out. In housing, it's shifted to the left. So if you look at housing from the back, you can always see it sticking out on the left, and on the right, you'll never see it. But on stables, you will never see it left or right because it like perfectly lines up with the ramparts. You'll see that it's like a rectangle that's perfectly aligned with all 3 ramparts. Now, if you have a bad gap on one of the sides on stables, you can see it looks kind of similar to housing, but there are just like bigger gaps. If you compare them side to side, you can see it's a bit different. And as well as, you know, we talked about the 2 block offsets for the middle. It also works on the bottom. So on the bottom, you can see there's 2 blocks here and here. While on housing, it's just completely flush the entire way. Housing's just a very neat bastion in the rampart area. Now, if you know you have a bridge bastion, and again, the easiest way to tell is just it's so damn tall. Like this is a triple and the bridge is even larger and taller. It's kind of hard to like get to the chalice, especially because if you run through the middle, there's going to be hogs and pigs, and it's really hard to live if you don't have any gold or gold armor. One of the best ways, I covered this in my last video, but you can just go straight to the chalice. So if you're looking at the bridge, there's 2 different sides. One of them is more open. You can kind of see like this middle area, like the lodestone chest up here. You can also see like the front of ramparts. Oh, there's like the front of the triple like this. You can see the chest. This is not the chalice side. This will have this little thing sticking out that can be buried. But if you see the other side, right, you see the backs of the triple, or you see like there's no lava. This is like the snout. If you know about the bridge looking like a piglin, you can maybe see like the lava eyes on either side. You can actually dig to the chalice by opening chunk borders. So you'll see that there's 2 different sides or 2 different chunks that the middle of the bastion lives in. And if you go to the leftmost one, looking at this angle, so where you see this lava, and you go 2 chunks out of the main, like, I guess, chunk, 1, 2. If you go to 8, 8 in the chunk, so you have your chunk coordinates here, and this is your location in the chunk, and you just dig straight down, you'll be on top of the chalice gold every single time at 8, 8. This is very helpful just because, you know, running through the bastions is really easy to take a lot of damage, and if you can find this and identify it, it's really, really helpful for, you know, staying safe, getting straight to where you need to go, and avoiding damage. Now, another tip is sometimes with stables, like the top of it, kind of like this, can be buried, and it can be kind of hard to differentiate the 2 different bastions. So what you don't want to look at is this rightmost basalt. You'll see this little pattern here, and it's the exact same on the double rampart. If I look here, It has this like blackstone L and basalt. It's the exact same here. Now what you can use to differentiate, obviously you have the chest. If you can see it, you know, chest versus no chest is pretty easy. But on the triple, there's some basalt on the like the center stairs right here. While on a double rampart, there's nothing. So I think this is probably the easiest way to tell if you have triples or not. Sometimes if you're looking up like here, it can be hard to tell like, oh, is this a supporting pillar for a triple or no? But this is like 100%. If you see basalt in the middle, this is a triple. And if you don't see basalt in the middle, but you see this thing, it's a double. And then single obviously is pretty unique because it's kind of just ruined and short and destroyed. Other tips for identifying bastions, I mean, if you're approaching from here, you know, if you can see this, you see it's not offset, you know it's stables, but stables is a really like uniform shape. Like the middle has these long tall pillars, and then there's like 6 distinct little like cubes, I guess. And there's a lot of lanterns everywhere. If you look at it from this side, the middle part has like these arches with lanterns, and this is pretty distinct. You know that you're at like the front of the stables and you can run straight through to get to the ramparts. But if you approach a housing, it's a lot less uniform. If you like play a bunch of housings, you'll notice that these outside ramparts can vary like a lot. Like sometimes there will just be like a big empty gap somewhere that you can see. So like this time we have like 7 of them, and then this one, you'll see in the back left, there's just nothing. There's this like bottom part that's very small. As well as like looking at it from here, it's just so much less uniform. It's kind of just really random and like variating, which is a good way to tell. Also, netherwart in the middle. This is a housing only thing. Very unique and very easy to tell. Another thing about housing, the same way that it really like perfectly carves out the triple, the manhunt area is also pretty similar. You'll see that it's just fully air everywhere here, and it's, you know, it's carving out the cube in the same way that the top is. So if you're like approaching and you look down and there's like random perfectly carved air, it's going to be housing. I kind of talked on it earlier, but stables has 3 different pieces, you know, each gap, and then the middle area always will have this little like entry point with these 2 like pig nose blocks, which are kind of unique. But you can also tell if it's a good or bad gap just from the back. So the bad gap, it looks pretty similar to housing, has these Tetris pieces, it's like mostly missing, while the good gap has these like 2 long like pillar, like carved out like pillar things here, kind of similar to treasure a bit. You also can tell from the side, it's kind of different for both, but bad gap has like this big chunk missing, while good gap, if you like, when you do the route, you'll notice like these holes exist. You know, like when you run down the stairs in the gap, you see this hole. So if you're looking at it from here, you're like, oh, that's the hole I look out of. And if you flip it around, if you look at a good gap on the left from the left, sometimes you can just see this gold block. That's pretty easy. You know, there's no gold in the bad gap, so it helps a lot. You can see it from the back as well. It also has these like lower entry points, and then bad gap on the right side, there's no hole here. You know, you'd expect you come down the stairs and there's a hole here, and there's not. Instead, there's just some random garbage. So you know it's fake. And then obviously the place that gaps get their name is under the ramparts on the left and right. If it's too tall, it's a bad gap. If it's 1 tall, it's a good gap. That's not really identifying bastions, but it's probably helpful for some people. I mostly talked about housing and stables, and how, you know, housing and stables are pretty similar. It's hard to tell apart, so I gave a lot for that. But it can be sometimes confusing to tell them apart from like bridge. Like if you just see this and you know it's a triple for whatever reason, it's like kind of hard to tell what it is. But bridge is the only bastion that has anything like behind the rampart. So if you just see like this, I guess, you see a triple and there's something sticking out the back, this is bridge and this is the chalice side. This also is pretty distinguishable. This like chunk of basalt, that's kind of the tooth of the pig. This is pretty unique to look at. There's also one on the other side that's a bit smaller. If you're looking at this side, obviously there's these little 2 things that stick out. You know that you can go through here to get to the chalice side. And then the most distinct thing about bridge is that there's like a stick over here supporting the chalice. So, you know, if you just see like this, it doesn't really matter. You don't know what rampart this is, but you see a big chunk of something. And, you know, housing or stables, there would be like some ramparts here or here. And instead, we have a stick. So you know that if you just run here and go up, you're at the chalice. And then bridge from the top, you know, it is super tall. You'll see I'm at Y90. While if I go into like the top of a triple rampart, like this, I'm at Y like 85 above it. So like the middle of bridge is like super tall. You know, looking into it, there's a bunch of lava flowing, a random weird chest. It's not very uniform. It's very distinct. And then the other bastion that's super tall is treasure, 95. Should be pretty easy to tell apart from bridge. You know, it mostly carves out terrain besides like this middle area, but you'll see like there's like a cube here. And then obviously the back. But treasure, I think in general, should be the easiest to tell apart. If you just see this, it's kind of weird, but whenever you see like a 90-degree angle like this with a lot of like smooth walls, like if you see this, you know it's treasure, just from like this view. It's a smooth wall with like 1 or 2 blocks randomly missing. It's very clean and uninterrupted. This is also distinct, but these kind of like small chunks of the Bastion are a lot harder to remember. So I would just focus on the big details and the big identifiers. Hopefully you learned something or there's something helpful. Bastions are pretty unique in terms of like all of them have their own little quirks and their own like terrain generation and everything. You know, playing the game is obviously the easiest way to learn things and, you know, get the pattern recognition that you need. But hopefully there's a few things you learned that you can, you know, you can spot and be like, oh, I know what I'm doing now, instead of being completely lost. Thanks for watching.